Hello everyone, welcome to the Dialogues Project, where we talk about inspiring educational projects in Latvia and in the English-speaking world. My name is Diana Bolgare, I'm an English language teacher and I instill love for English in kids and teens in Latvia through regular online classes and inspiring public speaking projects such as English theatre and poetry recitation contest, Poetry in My Heart. And today we're going to talk about storytelling, improvisation and language learning through drama, theatre and creative practices. And today my guest is Amanda Croft. Please, Amanda, tell us more about yourself, what you do, what you teach, how you do it, and about what you believe about language learning.
Yes, thank you, Diana, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And what I'd like to talk about is STILE, which is storytelling, theatre, and improvisation in language education, which is an idea that I developed. And I'm based in the UK, so I'm based in Faversham, a small town on the North Kent coastline, not far from Dover, and about an hour and 15 minutes from London. And we're blessed with amazing weather, in fact. And obviously we've got the coast to the north of us slightly. It takes me 20 minutes to get to the sea. And then on the other side, we've got beautiful Kent countryside. And Kent is known as what can I say? It's known as the garden of England. And I think that's because we produce a lot of fruit. So the fields are full of obviously sheep and cows, but we also have things like apple trees, pear trees, cherry trees, strawberry fields. And now, because of climate change, we also have vineyards. So now a lot of our land has been bought by French champagne makers, and we're making a sparkling white wine in Kent.
Sounds like a paradise.
Well, if you don't come for English, you can come for the wine, is what I often say. Yes, so I've got 30 years English language teaching experience. I did my first CELTA, equivalent to CELTA training in 1991, and I've been working both as an actress and also an English language teacher since that time. In 2011, I completed a master's in a TESOL, which is teaching English to speakers of other languages. And my specialist topic was gestures and language acquisition. So how does using our body, physicalizing and using our body help us acquire a language?
Amazing.
Which was a fascinating topic. And
Fascinating
obviously,
topic. Yeah, indeed. I noticed that body helps us acquire a language, and that is why I'm using different, finger plays and body techniques with my students, with my learners, and I noticed that it helps them internalize the language.
yes, absolutely. And I think that's the power of the work that I do, is exactly that. It's about internalizing the language and making it feel like it's coursing through your blood. Because at the moment, technology isn't such that we can have a microchip in our brain inserted with the language that we want to speak, or an injection into our blood. So I feel like storytelling, theatre, and improvisation is that injection. It gets the language underneath the skin.
It's a strong metaphor. And I absolutely agree with you, because from my experience, every year I go to the improvisation theatre camp here in Latvia to practice my Latvian. And I see the benefits of this approach to my language, to my command at Latvian, and also to the ability to speak, to open up. What can you say about the improvisation in language acquisition?
So I think there's something very important about improvisation as a technique. So when you're using improvisation, you create a very supportive environment. So the backbone of improvisation, when you're working with improvisation, is about not only jumping in and being spontaneous yourself, but also being supportive of the people around you who jump in. So if things start to go dip in a scene, for example, a spontaneous scene that you've started, then it's the position of the other participants to jump in and help you out. So I feel that there's a very supportive environment in the very natural backbone or foundation of improvisation, and I think that is very, very useful and helpful for our language learners. I think sometimes when you're learning a language, you believe that you're on your own and that you have to do it by yourself. But of course, communication doesn't happen in a room by yourself. Communication happens with other people. And there are always, in any conversation, there are always going to be other people in the room with you.
Exactly.
And I think, doing the practices of improvisation is about creating that supportive environment. And also the other thing that's very important to talk about when we talk about improvisation, I mean, our language learners are always looking for spontaneity and fluency. And how do you practice spontaneity? I think you practice spontaneity by being in the moment. And we're often called upon, or we often find ourselves in situations that we haven't prepared for. You can do lots of grammar exercises and you can do lots of testing and you could do all of those things, learn vocabulary lists, and there's always going to be a position where you suddenly find yourself having to improvise. I mean, even when you're looking for a word, you've got this specific word in your head and you can't think what it is, and you have to improvise. You have to find a way of communicating that meaning without using the word. That is improvisation.
You reminded me of two things during my improvisation camps. The first thing is the rule of improvisation theater: always say yes. And this is about this supportive environment that you create for your partner. And the other thing, I remembered this game when we had to maintain the rhythm and say the word. And sometimes I was stuck because I couldn't think of a word. I had to improvise, and the more I was in this situation, I understood that, okay, I'm not prepared, but with the practice, I can go on, I can invent something on the spot, I can think on my feet.
Mm-hmm, 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 mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely.
lots of interesting and useful things, especially for life, I would say.
Yes, yes. It's also interesting because I think even with some of the improvisation games, the one that you're talking about, I know, sometimes you don't get it right the first time, and it's a case of the neurons in your brain learning the game. But I also think that the more you become happy and confident in improvising, the easier improvising becomes. So the more attuned you are with thinking about how, you find yourself in a situation that you've not experienced before, and you think, oh, no, I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
You become confident around improvisation because you think, it happened to me yesterday. So I was on my way to Canterbury to teach my Afghan refugees, which I do on a Tuesday morning. And I got to Canterbury High, where I normally do my photocopying for the lesson. And I went in and the photocopier was down. So I just had one sheet, a sheet of pictures. They're an A2 group, sheet of pictures and some questions and some instructions. And I had also some games in my pocket as well. And I thought, the photocopier's down. I can't photocopy this. I'm going to have to improvise.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than feeling like, oh, and of course I was thinking, oh, I was going to photocopy all of these and be able to give a handout to everybody in the class. I couldn't give a handout to anybody, but I thought, I've got paper, I've got pens, I've got my notes. Just do it, and it was absolutely fine. And in fact, it was great. I really, really enjoyed the session, but I had to improvise. And I think when you have improvisational training, it helps you feel comfortable in those situations.
And also be prepared for anything, because we don't know what will be right just this corner, you see,
Mhm.
and be ready for life, be ready to accept the challenge. That's what improvisation is
Mhm.
about. All
Yes.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thank you very much. One little thing I wanted to ask you, as a because you're an expert in this field. Sometimes people think that this is impossible to improvise with young children. That improvisation is a kind of a cherry on top of the language skill. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think when you're working with young children learn through play, and improvisation is just a form of play.
Mm-hmm.
And often you're in improvisation, you're appreciated because of the playfulness of what you do. And I think children, you think about the games that children play when they're growing up. They play mums and dads, they play going shopping, going cooking. I think of myself as a child and I would be in the garden with my doll in a pram. I'd be collecting things and pretending they were peas and I'd be cooking with them. And all of that is playful activity. And I remember taking my children actually to a French language school when they were little, before they started school. And they loved it. And it was all about going to the shops and buying sweets and playing. And it's just like playful scenarios where you're not actually teaching the language in an instructed way. You're playing with the language. And that's what I think is so wonderful. And the children pick it up really quickly.
And I think this is the very important thing that you mentioned. This is just another way of learning. You incorporate creativity, playfulness into language learning, and no more tests, no more exams. You just live the language with these techniques.
Yes, exactly. Living the language. And that's what's so important. I think Viola Spolin, I don't know if you know her, but she's
I do.
yeah, so she was one of the creators of improvisation.
Hmm.
And she says you can't teach anyone anything with the, and when she says that, what she means is that all of our actual fundamental learning, the learning that gets underneath our skin, is through experiences. We learn through experiences. And I think that is the beauty of the work with storytelling, theatre, and improvisation. It's about creating role plays, scenarios, and learning through experience, experiencing the language. And it also, I think it helps with emergent language where students think, oh, I don't know how to say this in English. And then you support them at their time of need with the language that they need. And it
Exactly.
sticks.
Yeah, that's why you need a specialist by your side to jump in exactly at the right moment with the right word, with the right phrase, because this is the place where your emotions are at peak and you
Mhm,
absorb information quickly in
mhm.
a natural way.
Yes, yes. And it is interesting because it's always that question of if the learners want to learn something, and it's a very simple thing I often sometimes do is that I might, and this is with a particular word, they're looking for a word, they don't know it. I'll put the letters, I'll do like a hangman kind of idea on the board with this is the word, this is the starting letter, these are the number of letters, and I'll get them to guess it. And then they don't know the word. So sometimes they can't guess the letters in the word. I mean, they guess some of them, they'll say some vowels and they still haven't got it. And I said, well, would you like me to tell you? And and I ask that question because potentially they might not want to know the word. It might not actually be of any interest to them at all to know the word. But if you ask the question, their brains engage. I ask the question, would you like to know? And they go, yes, yes, we want to know. And then I'll give them the final letter, or I'll give them the word or the pronunciation of the word, and they'll go, oh, great. So asking the question it's a really interesting way of working with language, because I think they really engage. They really engage because the minute you ask them that question, do you want to know? And the minute they say yes, then they are all ears, all of them, and they're all listening.
Yeah. Here I clearly see how your acting background blends and merges with your teacher's background. When did you understand that your acting experience and your teaching experience belong together?
Yeah. I think I understood it from the very beginning. So I did my acting training first. Actually, it was my mother's suggestion. So my mother said to me, as an actor, you will always be unemployed, she said. But which is partly true, you're often out of work, and often actors, especially in Britain, often actors end up working in hospitality, in the hospitality industry. And she said, why don't you do an EFL training? Learn to be an English language teacher. And she was an English language teacher herself, so she knew this. And she said, we need actors in our classrooms. That's what she said. And what I found is that the acting background and gesture and facial expression and being able to emotionally express a certain characteristic or a certain verb, is really useful in an English language classroom, especially when you're working with low levels. When
Yeah.
you're working with low levels, and I would, I'm thinking about my Afghan refugees now who are kind of A1, A2. When I'm presenting the words, I'm presenting the words and acting them out, and I think that's quite useful for them. But I also get them to act them out. So I get them, if we're looking at jobs, for example, looking at different jobs, I get them to act the jobs out, and then everybody in the class has to guess the job,
Yeah.
for example.
TPR, total physical response, and a memo
Exactly.
game.
Exactly. And it is amazing because even without language, even if they haven't got the language, they can get up and they can perform.
Okay. Actually, Amanda, we met through Rachel Roberts' Design to Flourish program.
Yes.
We studied there together. What brought you there, and how did being in that space created by Rachel for freelance professionals shape the work you're offering today?
Well, I think it coincided actually with two things. So when I joined Rachel Roberts' course, I knew that what I wanted to do was run immersion language programs in the UK. That was key. And I thought she would help me market that idea. But at the same time as doing or starting her course, I also ran a workshop called From Storytelling to Performance for another Rachel called Rachel Paling, who's a neurolanguage coach. And she teaches neurolanguage coaching. And she was running a conference in March of 2020, must have been 2024, the year we did our training with Rachel Roberts. And I ran this 1 hour workshop with 50 English language teachers. Well, actually, not all English language teachers. Some of them teach other languages like German or Italian. And it was received with such appreciation that was really the trigger that made me think that English or language teachers in general actually need training in theatre practice. So my workshop, From Storytelling to Performance, the group were completely and entirely engaged for that 1 hour. It was total physical response because I always there were no slides, there was no sitting down until they wanted to, but I opened the curtains. We had this beautiful scenery out of the window, beautiful blue skies, Spanish sunshine, just glorious. And we'd been in a closed space with the curtains closed and watching a number of presentations. And then I got up and I went, we can turn off the computer, we can open the curtains, and let's have some light, some air, and everybody stand up. And the atmosphere in the room changed. It changed dramatically because people were engaged, not just with their brains, but with their whole self.
Exactly. That's how I feel we need to approach education, with our whole bodies, not only mentally, but physically and emotionally. And I can tell you that me, as an English language teacher, interested in drama, I need such training. I need these experiences. And not only me, teachers in Latvia also need that, because my colleagues asked me about that opportunity to be trained.
Yes. Well, I think this is why I've started running STILE courses, storytelling, theatre and improvisation in language education courses for language teachers, because I don't think it's a provision that is addressed in general language teacher training at present. So there are CELTA courses, and in fact, I've got a case study really, a woman called Danielle who did her CELTA training in January of last year. She has now participated in 2 workshops, one that I did at IATEFL in Edinburgh last year, the other one for BSIG in Athens in November last year. And she's come on now all of my online courses. And in fact, she says, nobody teaches your approach in CELTA training. And she says, it's made my life. She said, I wish I'd known now. I wish I'd known then what I know now. But what I feel about this particular case study or this particular person is that I feel that she's really lucky because she's found me a year after her CELTA training. And she says that what my approach, she says, is just very simple. And as a consequence of it being simple, and I do a lot of modeling with so if I'm instructing or giving instructions, I always model what I mean so that people are clear about what they have to do. She says that it's a simple, well-modeled approach that is really easy to apply. And I truly believe that. It's not rocket science. But some teachers don't feel very confident getting their students up on their feet, and they're not sure once they do that, what they then do and how they do it.
That is why they need training. They need to be trained. They need this experience in their blood, bones, and body.
Mm-hmm. Yes, because we know that makes people confident. Once you've done it, once you've practiced, and that's what all of this training is about. It's about rehearsal space. Yes. Rehearsal space for the real thing.
When you rehearse, you're not afraid anymore.
Exactly.
You know what to do.
Exactly.
And you are prepared.
Yes. And of course, rehearsing is all part of theatre practice. Actors don't get up on stage generally if they're in a play, a written play. They don't get up on stage without having practiced. They get up on stage having practiced, and they've rehearsed. They've rehearsed for 3 weeks, maybe, the role that they're going to play, and they've worked with them. And this is the other thing that we don't really often talk about. I mean, we've talked about support from other participants in improvisation, but really we're engaged in team building and team making. We work on working with each other. It's team skills. When you're putting on a piece of theatre, you're working with team skills. Like in any kind of sport, like in football or in hockey or netball. Yes, all of these are team games, and theatre is just another team game which applies creativity.
Mm-hmm. Here in Latvia, we have a so-called theatre sport. I was really surprised when I heard that, but now, listening to your explanations and ideas, I understand this is another type of sport. When you build a team, you play in a team, you listen to your partners, you play together, and you rehearse. And about the rehearsals, I now remember one comment from a lady. She commented poetry in my heart, and she told me, "What a nice way to build confidence." And I said, I think this is the easiest way to build confidence on stage, because before you come on stage, you have to rehearse and practice this one poem for 20, 50 times. And of course, when you go and perform in front of the real audience, you feel the word, you see the impact, and something becomes with you. You become an actor. You become someone whose words people listen to.
Yes, absolutely. And even listening to you saying that, I think, Diana, something shifted in me. And I think that's what happens. I think something shifts inside our learners when they perform. And I think it's interesting because you can, in theatre, when I've worked in theatre, I used to tour with TIE, which is where my STILE idea came from. So TIE is Theatre in Education. And I thought, okay, what do I do? I'm doing storytelling, theatre and improvisation in language education. But when I used to tour with TIE productions, I could be on the road for 9 months with the same production. And every time I performed, you're never in front of the same audience. You're always in front of a different audience, but you're performing the same piece. But the words live differently and your intonation changes. And the way you play those words can be different from one day to the next. And you understand something about the story that you're telling much more deeply after a number of performances. And so the language and the relationships within the piece that you're performing deepen, and your psychological and your emotional body connect really deeply with the language that you're saying. The words become your own words.
We are very lucky because in Latvia we have this touring company and English theatre come to Latvia to show the performances, and I visit them every year. I watch 1984, Christmas Carol, Great Gatsby. This year it will be Raven, based on Edgar Allan Poe's work. And I sometimes look at the audience and I see how children, students watch. They are totally absorbed, some of them. And I think the shift that you mentioned also happens in them while they are in the audience.
Yes.
This click with English literature, with English language, just happens.
Yeah, because they're engaged in the story. I mean, we haven't really talked about engagement, but I do feel that the kind of work that I do with storytelling and theatre, it's about engaging your audience. And I'll go back to, my recent experience last week. I started to talk to the Afghan women about their journey, and obviously this is sensitive, this is sensitive and emotional. And so I thought, well, where do I begin with this? How do I begin with this? And I thought the way I begin, of course, is to talk about my own story. I was born in Australia. I moved to the UK. I then went back to Australia and then lived in Australia as a teenager for 4 years. And then I came back to the UK. So making those country transitions and settling in another country, even when the language is the same, is not easy. And so, but I was able, by sharing my story, this enabled my learners to share their stories. And also the language that I used, they could then repeat. So to leave a country, for example, and then the past tense of that, I left my country.
Mm-hmm. I see. I think this skill of storytelling is one of the most important ones because we always tell stories. This is how we interact, and storytelling is a very powerful tool. And I remember one of your online workshops on storytelling when you taught us the technique of E and D. And I'm still using it with my B1, B2 students. How does it feel when you see that what you teach lives in other teachers' practices, in other learners' hearts?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm so passionate about my methodology that and that's the reason, another reason for teaching teachers is because I want to, you know, I'm not a young woman anymore, and I, my father died when he was 67. I've got, if I died at the same time, I've got 9 or 10 years left. And I kind of feel like I don't want to die with my song still in me. So I want to share my practices because they were fundamental to me as a young woman growing up. They were fundamental to me in terms of becoming confident and understanding. I was a very shy teenager. And I just feel that if I can pass this gift on to language teachers, I not only enable language teachers to feel more confident and comfortable in the practices of theatre in the language classroom, but also they're going to enable and bring so much life to their language learners that's who I'm thinking about in the end. I'm thinking about those students in my who were like me as or who are like me as young people. And if I can enable them and light or ignite a spark in their learning journey, then that's why I do what I do.
And knowing all that, we or I feel obliged to be visible to those who need my skills and you who need your skills to make this world a better place.
Yes, exactly. And I think the way that we both work, Diana, in the present climate is absolutely crucial for young learners and young adults because they're the COVID children. They're the children of social media. They're the children of disconnection.
Yeah.
And what I feel our practices do is they connect people to each other. And if we need anything, if our young people need anything at the moment, they need connection.
I totally agree with you here, and I feel goosebumps on my skin, and I feel inspired to continue doing what I do and to connect young people together. Thank you very much, Amanda, for this insightful conversation. I hope lots of children and parents and teachers will benefit from that.
Yes, I hope so too. So I guess we need to tell people how to connect to the
We
work that we
will.
do.
Yeah, Amanda, you can say it now and it will be written in the comments below.
Okay, so if you want to get in touch with me, I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me under the name of Amanda Croft. And I also have a website which is called englishwithstyle.com. So if you're interested in the work that I do, you'll find me there. Thank you very much, Diana.
Thank you very much, Amanda, and you can always find me at dlc.lv. Thank you and see you next time.
Bye-bye.